Hey kids, do you want to be the envy of a very small number of people?
I guess.
Want to keep the rickety, greasy wheels of what happened turning?
No, really.
Then you should check out what's premiering at pixelempire.com.
Hey, is this a merch video?
This fantabulous merch includes the very first official What Happened t-shirt and mug,
Oh, no way.
a Flophouse 2069 cyberpunk poster to piggyback on the newest trend,
Top to temple.
a Metal as Hell Edgelords t-shirt and hoodie.
Huh? Isn't that series dead?
No, it's not. My return is nigh. Okay, thank you. Anyway, there's even more stuff, and if you opt for a bundle, you can save a few bucks. So hit the link in the description and check out pixelempire.com/MattMcMuscles.
All right, I'll check it out. Can you start the episode now?
Yeah, you saw what I was doing there. All right, you got it, kid. And let that set the tone. Now today's subject is pretty infamous, so while I assume most of you know what it is, for all you big rig virgins out there, here's a quick refresher.
Driving around in fucking trucks!
And that's pretty much it. Said trucks first hit the road on November 20th, 2003 for PCs via Walmart, who had exclusive distribution rights because the world is awful. See, around this time, the horrible conglomerate was a great choice to hawk your shovelware because you'd almost always make your money back, preying on kids who would point to an eye-catching game box at the checkout line. That is, of course, if you made your game nice and cheap, and as we'll see, Big Rigs Over-the-Road Racing was made nice and cheap. Well, maybe not the nice part. Now let's take a look at that box, shall we? As you can see, it's not objectively bad, maybe a tad generic, but there's a certain air of excitement going on. There's trucks, the font is readable, so nothing too egregious here. Therefore, judging this game based on its cover, it looks like an inoffensive racing title. But like a skinwalker, it uses this facade to fool the feeble minds of others. Now, if you were to put the disc in your computer, in 2003, you'd be presented with this, a selection of 4 trucks or cars and 5 tracks, except that 2 of those tracks are pretty much identical and one just straight up crashes the game. You'll then find within seconds of playing that everything, I guess with the exception of the ground, lacks collision, which in turn lets you go apeshit throughout every course. The Virgil to your Dante, the other big rig who appears in every level, remains unmoving on the starting line, which results in this racing game no longer being a racing game because there's literally no racing going on. Also, there's the music, which is to say, no music, and that goes for the sound effects too. There's the sound of your engine, and that's it, which to me means no sound effects at all. Now, I remind you, this was a boxed, finished game that was sold in stores, so I think I say for all of us, what happened? Okay, if we were to consult the back of the box for Big Rigs Over-the-Road Racing, we would see the following. From the desert to the plains, you'll be hauling loads and trying to stay one step ahead of the law as you climb into your big rig for non-stop driving action. Race across America and deliver your load to its destination before the competition. So keep the tank full and your pedal to the metal as you rack up points and own the road. Okay, we need more clues, more insight into how this game became a thing. If we were to let our eyes rove over the rest of the box, we can see that the publisher was Game Mill, which is a milquetoast company that I'd be mildly surprised if any of you are familiar with. Now, the developer of these big rigs was Stellar Stone, a studio of confusing origin that I'd be really surprised if any of you have heard of. I mean, how could you not, with such memorable hits as Ultimate Civil War Battles Robert E. Lee vs. Ulysses S. Grant, Big Buck Trophy Hunt, not to be confused with Big Buck Hunter, Total Pinball 25, Midnight Race Club Supercharged, and of course, the classic fast-paced arcade taxi racer, Taxi Racer, or as it's more commonly known as, Taxi Belzhalem. Now, I said a company of confusing origin, and that's because while originally based in California, Stellar Stone would primarily farm out a lot of their work, or all of it, it's a bit unclear since they no longer exist, to a much smaller office in the Ukraine. They did this to keep development costs low, so it's this team who were the real truckers hauling all the loads. Now, one name that pops up a few times in the admittedly very light credits list is Sergei Titov, the alleged producer and lead programmer for the Big Rigs. Sergei is a bit of a controversial character, something we'll touch upon later, but he's relevant in this story because in September of 2008, a Big Rigs fan site, no, you're not having a stroke, I said Big Rigs fan site, yourwinner.com, conducted an interview with Sergei who may or may not have shed some light into the development of one of the worst games ever made. He confirmed that Big Rigs was developed in the Ukraine, as the average production costs would have been between 3 to 5 times higher if Stellar Stone had contracted a studio based in North America or elsewhere in Europe. Now, the quote-unquote engine the game ran under was called Eternity, which was a custom bit of quote-unquote technology that Sergei himself had designed. The reason why he's credited as a producer and lead programmer for Big Rigs is for this reason. He had licensed out the engine to Stellar Stone in exchange for, in his words, a large chunk of the company, which is, I don't know about that. Looking at Stellar Stone's back catalog, I don't see someone going, "Oh yeah, I want a little sip of that gravy boat." Anyway, Sergei then claimed he had nothing to do with the actual creation of all this over-the-road racing, despite the credits prominently displaying his name, and stated in that same interview that he lacked any power to stop Big Rigs from being released. Now, while that's obviously not something that can be easily confirmed, one of his other claims certainly is. Big Rigs used to be something very different, and at a time was probably going to be better, or at least, approaching an alpha state. Originally, the plan at some point was for a full-fledged racing title that offered a multitude of cars, tracks, and collision detection. But according to Sergei, Game Mill Publishing decided to cut the project in half and to make 2 completely separate games out of it. So all the load carrying and truck driving would be relegated to Big Rigs, whereas all the hot supercars and, I guess, bouncing asses would be found in Midnight Race Club Supercharged. While there's no official reasoning for this change, Sergei speculated that it was to make more money, as they could charge double the amount with 2 SKUs versus 1. While some of his other claims seem a bit iffy, I'm inclined to agree here. But you don't have to take his word for it, because you can just look at the game code. Big Rigs contains lots of shared files between both titles, and even has the title screen from Midnight Racing under Club Megacharge, I already forgot its name, in its source files. And not only that, you can see all types of fucked up unused data, which includes character models, trucks with actual trailers, and some great billboards like Choose Your Freedom, You Re-Special, and finally, For the Winners. Whoa, we're getting a little spicy here, folks. Wrapping up with that Sergei interview, he revealed that he had offered to send any players unhappy with their purchase of Big Rigs a free title from the Activision Value catalog, i.e. other shitty games. That was dependent, of course, if said grumpy gamers had sent him their copy with receipt and registration card, and apparently 20 people took him up on that, so at least that's something, but I don't actually know if that's something. Even Sergey admits that the game was not done at all, but someone at Game Mill or Stellar Stone were aware of that because there was an online patch, kinda, which brought the game up to version 1.0, which is messed up, really, to say that a fully boxed and released retail game somehow wasn't 1.0, whatever. This new version instituted two main changes. One, the rival trucker now seems to have some form of AI as they actually start navigating the track now, but before they complete the race, they always stop short of crossing the finish line. So no matter what you do, you're always winner. Is something I would be saying to you if they didn't also change the game's best feature. That's a massive downgrade if I've ever seen one. And that's it. That's all the additional work that was ever officially done on Big Rig, so it's really clear that either Game Mill or Stellar Stone or both couldn't have given less of a shit when it came to quality or offering anything approaching a finished title. They made sure it had graphics that a vehicle could be controlled, kinda, and then they shipped it, assuming the average Walmart shopper would never really notice. Now, when all those loads were hauled into those same Walmarts, in most likelihood the Big Rig stink lines would have gone unsniffed, relegated to the dustbin of history with nary a soul aware of it. But really, it was Alex Navarro's classic video review which cemented the game in most people's minds, and is probably responsible for the type of cult following it has since amassed. Godspeed, you absolute legend. Now, we're not quite done yet. As for the Afternoon Race Boys Ultra Combo, it released just 2 months later in January of 2004, and while not as infamous as its Big Rig brother, wasn't a whole lot better. Ultra Civil War Fighter 2 Robert E. Lee Cross Ulysses S. Grant was actually Stellar Stone's final release, as they shortly thereafter, and when I say shortly I mean immediately, filed for bankruptcy. As for Game Mill, well, unlike Stellar Stone, they are very much still publishing games today, mostly, exclusively licensed ones, such as Cartoon Network, Battle Crashers, Cobra Kai, The Karate Kid Saga Continues, Frozen, Olaf's Quest, Nickelodeon Kart Racers, Nickelodeon Kart Racers 2, Zombieland, Double Tap, and G.I. Joe Operation Nobody Played It. Now, we need to loop back around to Sergey one final time, because we're not done with him yet. While some of his claims regarding Big Rig seem fairly reasonable, what he's done in the subsequent years is, for lack of a better term, a bit sus. He briefly joined Riot Games in 2009, but then struck out on his own with numerous zombie survival titles that have interchangeable names. War Incorporated, Battlezone, Infestation, Survivor Stories, Infestation, Day One, Outbreak, New Dawn, but none were more famous than War Z, the original name for Infestation, that at one point reportedly had 25 million active players, yet thousands and thousands of negative reviews for being a cheaply made, bordering on copyright infringement DayZ ripoff. And he's still making those exact same types of things in 2020, so those claims he had made where he said he had nothing to do with the baffling decisions, cut corners, and sloppy programming of over-the-road racing? One thing you can safely say is that Big Rigs is one of those legendary titles that while having almost no positive aspects at all, its negatives are still so stunning, its design so flawed, and its code so unfinished that the fascination the greater gaming industry has with it still endures some 17 years later. And damn it, for that, we salute you, you big, glorious motherfucking rigs. If you know of any other flaming car wrecks deserving of being on our stage, shout them out in the comments below, drive all night over to my official Twitter, or park your load down at the Flophouse VIP Patreon and become a big boss and nominate the subject of a future episode. See you next time, and thanks for watching.
They ask you how you are, and you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.